What's going on, everybody? My name is VerbatimB, and as you can tell by the title down yonder, these are my top 5 most influential video games. Now, I'd like to pop a quick disclaimer here and just say that these aren't necessarily my favorite or the games that I consider to be the best, just the ones that have been most influential on me as a gamer. These ones have made my preferences and habits what they are and turned me into the player I am today. So, without further ado, and I'd like to add, in no particular order, these are my top 5 most influential video games. Okay, so the first one is Halo 2, and honestly I had a tough time choosing between a couple of the Halo titles, specifically between Halo 2 and Halo Reach, because I had more memories and probably a bigger nostalgia boner for Halo Reach. But the metric I'm using for this video is which had more influence on me as a gamer, and if I'm going by that, I've got to give it to Halo 2. Not saying that Reach didn't have plenty of influence on me as a gamer as well, but I've decided to limit this video to just one game per series, and so my pick for this one is Halo 2. I'll explain why. Halo 2 was really the first video game that I was aware of pre-launch. Not only that, but it was also the first game I was ever hyped for pre-launch. On top of all that, it was the first time I had ever really conceived of the notion of a midnight release for a game. Before that, I never really thought of when a game comes out, but Halo 2 changed all that for me, which is the first reason it's so influential in my life. The release of Halo 2 is probably my most vivid childhood memory. My brother and my cousin both went to the midnight release, but seeing as how I was 9 years old, the game was rated M, the nearest game store was an hour away, and it was a school night, I didn't get to go to the release. So I was pretty bummed because I knew all my friends were going to get a chance to play it and would be bragging about it the next day. But I woke up at about 1:30, 2 o'clock that next morning to the sounds of a Ghost's twin blasters firing, and I ran into my brother's room to see what was going on. My brother and cousin let me play the level they were on, which happened to be when the Scarab is on its way to New Mombasa and you fly the ghosts under the bridge underneath it. And if I hadn't been 9 years old, I swear I would have jizzed my pants that night. On top of the great memories, there are a couple of other reasons I picked Halo 2. It's the first time I ever really went to any LAN party, a social gathering that would consume the next decade of my life. On top of that, it was the first time I had ever used an expansion for a game. I got the disc that had the extra maps for the Xbox edition, and to this day I think it holds up as one of the better first-person shooter map packs that I've ever played. But I could talk about Halo 2 all day long, so let's move on to the next number of the list. Alright, number 2 on the list is The Elder Scrolls V: Skyrim. A game that I've put more hours into than any other game before or since. And Skyrim is weird because it wasn't the first time I had played a Western RPG. That honor belongs to probably Darkstone on the PS1. It wasn't the first time I had played an open world sandbox type game. That honor probably goes to Grand Theft Auto 3 or San Andreas. It wasn't the first time I had even encountered a game's story and lore that I just fell in love with that much. The difference with Skyrim, though, was that I'd never encountered all of those elements in the same game, and I had never enjoyed any one of them half as much as I did when I played Skyrim. One of my favorite things about Skyrim really has nothing to do with the game itself, and that's that it really strengthened a bond I have with one of my nephews. Now we always have some tips to trade, some stories to tell, and it's really comforting to me because for a long time I didn't think we were going to have very similar taste in video games. But then Skyrim came along and changed all that. And now, not only do we have similar taste in video games, it seems like we're having similar taste in everything when it comes to music and movies, and I'm really enjoying that friendship that's growing out of that, and it's all thanks to Skyrim. Aside from that, I really don't know what it is about the game that makes me love it so much. It might be that it came at a time in my life when it seemed all I'd ever play again was shooters. It might be that it came at a time in my life when I didn't have any Xbox Live and a single-player game was basically the only option for me. It might just be because it was a great game and arguably one of the better games that's ever been made. But whatever the reason, I love Skyrim, and whatever the reason, it's been one of the most influential games to me, especially in my recent gaming history. Okay, so number 3 on the list is Super Mario 64. And honestly, there are plenty of Nintendo games, and specifically Mario games, that could have easily taken this spot on the list. Super Mario Bros. 3 remains my favorite platformer, Mario Kart 64 remains my favorite racing game, and some of my greatest moments of triumph and my greatest moments of defeat have both come at the hands of Mario Party games. That being said, I wanted to stick to my one game per franchise rule, so my choice this time was Super Mario 64. The Nintendo 64 was the console that I grew up with. It was the only real major home console that my family owned during its prime, and we had a lot of great games for it. But one great game we didn't have for it was Super Mario 64. My brother did have the game, and I borrowed it from him at every opportunity I got for as long as I could keep it. This was at a time in my life where all I really cared about and all I really thought about was video games. But it was unfortunate for me because I wasn't really yet physically or mentally capable of playing a lot of video games, at least any video games that had any depth. That all began to change with Super Mario 64 though. It was simple enough that I could easily understand it and pick it up, yet it had enough depth that when I beat a level I felt like I was really smart. I had to use my brain to beat this game, but I could do it. And that was a really big turning point for me because it used to be I just had to use my hands to beat video games. And Super Mario 64 was the first time I remember having to use my brain as well. That being said, it's time for the fourth entry on the list. Another classic from the Nintendo 64. This time, GoldenEye 007. The first first-person shooter I ever got my hands on, and at the time, my favorite game. GoldenEye would go on to influence the trajectory of my gaming habits through the end of high school. If it weren't for my love of GoldenEye, I never would have fallen for Halo as hard as I did, and by proxy, I never really would have fallen in love with the first-person shooter genre as hard as I did for the 7th generation of consoles. Unfortunately, in my opinion, GoldenEye doesn't hold up quite as well as a lot of the other games on the Nintendo 64. And for this reason, I almost put Call of Duty's Nazi Zombie mode ahead of it, because I honestly have just as many memories with that game sitting on the couch with my friends. But when I remembered that this was a video about the most influential games in my life rather than my favorites, GoldenEye once again eclipsed zombies. Sparking my infatuation with the first-person shooter genre isn't the only reason I put GoldenEye on this spot on the list. It also, more than any other game that I can recall, influenced my love of multiplayer split screen, a feature that is unfortunately dying out in video games today. On a brighter note, local multiplayer, although it's not split screen, is alive and well with my fifth and final pick for the list, Mortal Kombat 9. This was another one that I had kind of a tough time calling, between Mortal Kombat 4 and Mortal Kombat 9. Now let me explain why I have Mortal Kombat 4 there. My brother moved to college in 2004, and when he went, he left behind his Nintendo 64 for me. It was my first official console of my own. And I was surprised a couple of months later when he showed up to my birthday party bringing me 4 games. A motocross game, Wave Race, NBA Jam, and Mortal Kombat 4. I popped in and played the other 3 games first, and I really enjoyed all 3 of them, particularly NBA Jam. But I left Mortal Kombat for last because at that point I really didn't understand what either of the words in the title meant, and it just seemed like some obscure random game my brother had picked up for me. But when I popped that into my Nintendo 64, I realized I couldn't have been more wrong. MK4 didn't leave my Nintendo for the next several months. I hadn't really ever played a fighting game before, outside of the odd couple of games of Street Fighter, and I never really realized that I loved that genre until I played MK4. On top of that, I found myself pretty good at the game, which was another thing that I really enjoyed at the time. Now, the reason that I picked Mortal Kombat 9 over Mortal Kombat 4, as much influence as it had on me, is that Mortal Kombat 4 made me fall in love with the MK franchise. A single franchise. Mortal Kombat 9 made me crave other fighting games. It made me fall in love with an entire genre. And it's really been a genre that I've found to be my favorite since MK9 released. For that reason, and for that reason alone, I picked Mortal Kombat 9 over MK4. Well, there you go, folks. That was my top 5 most influential games. I'm VerbatimB. If you've enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. If you've got any questions for me, feel free to leave a comment. Thanks for watching.